Hello and welcome. Thank you for checking out this testimony. As I described in the video entitled, Finding Out About Jesus, I had been an all-state athlete with some scholarships, and yet, because of my interest from childhood in what happened to us after we died, who God is and what kind of lives should we be living, which I thought should be based on love, I decided that because no one really knows how long they have here in this world, I wanted to use what time I had to promote the importance of love. And the best vehicle I had to do that, and that I would enjoy the most, was music. So I gave myself a year after high school to find or create a working band while I also was beginning to write music. So I placed an ad looking for a studio to record in, and the reply I got was from the guy I would ultimately start a great rock band with. We had similar musical influences and shared the objective of using music to promote only positive things, especially love. Well, long story short, inside of 1 year, we had a band with the top musicians in the area as far as I was concerned. We had 2 trucks full of sound gear, lighting, and instruments. We had a road crew and management, were sponsored by a sound company, had written several outstanding songs, and were making plans to record our first album and tour the East Coast of the U.S. But I had started experiencing this pretty intense moral conflict because this project that started out to be about promoting love and positive things had morphed into a pretty hardcore rock and roll outfit. Even though we were writing and playing more original songs, the bulk of material was still covers, and those were bands like Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Judas Priest, and so forth, which no one would ever confuse with love and positive-oriented songs. And it became a lifestyle that to the world would seem ideal. Party when you wake up, water ski or go sailing during the day, rehearse or perform at night, party till dawn, and repeat. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and it was all happening remarkably easy. But for all that, I kept thinking, this isn't good for the soul. If you were to just look at it in terms of whether it was a positive or negative influence on society, it just struck me as negative. Sure, it was great from a personal self-indulgence, no limits, take the world by storm, and damn the torpedoes perspective. But if everybody lived like that, especially with some of the other whacked out things that go on behind the scenes, the world wouldn't make it. It would be some surreal science fiction wasteland with complete social chaos and utterly dysfunctional human relationships. I like to say that it's every schoolboy's daydream who hasn't actually done it. And believe me, the higher you climb, it's not what you'd think. And I was continually thinking and knowing inside that everybody has accountability for what they do and promote. And so I had accountability to whatever I was involved in and promoting. And I was also continually asking myself, would you want your daughter marrying someone like you? And I was continually saying, no. Then one night, I was with my girlfriend, who later would become my wife, and we were lying in bed in my room, which was in the attic of the house. And being an attic, it had an angled ceiling. And I was laying there thinking about all these issues and things that Jesus had said. And even though at that point I wasn't sure if he was God's son, I was sure that he was someone who knew God. And I really wanted to pray, but I wasn't sure what my girlfriend would say. So I said to her, what would you say if I said I wanted to pray? And she said, I would probably pray with you, which was great news to me, so we knelt down beside the bed and I began to pray. I prayed, God, I am really sorry for anything I've ever done to upset you or that was wrong. And from now on, I'm going to try to live the way Jesus says to in the Bible. When I finished that simple prayer, I turned to give my girlfriend a kiss, but I couldn't see her face. The room was pitch black, and I couldn't see her right there next to me. Now, I had been holding her hand with my right hand, and because it was so dark and I couldn't see her, I took my right hand and I ran it along her arm and up over her shoulder to locate her head, and I grabbed her face from under her chin. Then I started to notice that it looked like I was beginning to just barely see her, like my eyes were adjusting to the dark. But as I looked, and the appearance was becoming slightly more visible, it wasn't looking like her. It was looking less and less like her. And her face looked like it was moving around, sort of like in a slight wave motion. So I began to pinch her jaw in my right hand to try to hold it still, and I took my left hand and put it up to my face to see if I could see it, to try to determine whether my eyes were playing tricks on me or adjusting or what was going on. And I began bouncing my hand off of my nose, trying to see my hand, but it was so dark I couldn't see my own hand right there in front of my face. Then I heard her say, "What are you doing?" And I turned back to look at her, and I could see the image becoming more clear and more clear and more clear until right there in front of me, in perfect clarity, in a shade of sick, putrid green, was an Asian woman looking me straight in the eye. She had what I would describe as mostly Mongolian features. Nothing against Mongolian people, it's just what she looked like. She had what looked like long, greasy hair, and her teeth looked very long, like as if from gum rot. And she had this wicked grin, and she was staring me right in the eyes. Understand that. We were looking right at each other. This was not an imagination of something I thought I might have been seeing. It was two conscious beings, her and me, and we were looking right at each other. Just then, I noticed the atmosphere seemed thick, almost like peanut butter or a wet, suffocating blanket. And yet, there was also a sense of hollow bottomlessness, like a bottomless pit. And in an instant, there was the most terrifying presence of pure evil, the absolute vacuum of anything holy. Pure evil and dread and terror. It was not my thoughts or emotions from being afraid. I'd tell you if it was. I have no problem with that. But that was not the case. I was emotionless and just taking it all in. And just as the intensity of the experience was reaching an apex, suddenly my girlfriend cried out my name in terror. And like pure instinct, I knew what I had to do. I stood up, put my left hand up on the angled ceiling, and followed it down to the end of the room where the light was, and feeling around for the light, I turned it on. I also felt like I needed to make immediate contact with someone who believed in God. So we ran downstairs to call my friend, who I sometimes read the Bible with. And suddenly I noticed something remarkably strange. I looked at the clock, and the time was 3 a.m. We had gone to bed at around 11 p.m. We maybe talked for a few minutes. It didn't seem possible that it could be past midnight, but it was 3 a.m. Nevertheless, I picked up the phone and began calling, but my friend wasn't answering. Back in those days, there was no voicemail, so I just let it ring and ring and ring. Then I heard the phone pick up, but no voice. And then it hung up, and I thought, oh no, and I called right back. Again, it rang and rang and rang. Finally, I heard the phone pick up, but again, no voice. So I began calling out his name. Finally, I heard him struggle out from a deep sleep to say, hello? And when he answered, there was finally the sense that there was a conclusion to it, like some kind of connection to the experience had been broken. So I told him what happened, although he really seemed like he just wanted to go back to sleep. Maybe he didn't believe me or just didn't care, I don't know. But my girlfriend and I stayed up, and when 7:30 came around, I began calling the members of the band, starting with the lead singer, and told them what happened and saying I was quitting the band. However, because I cared about the other members and didn't want to just abandon them, there was difficulty just walking away. But I had to do it, and eventually I did through some extraordinary events, including an experience of foresight seeing the jungles of the Philippines, which are described in the video entitled How and Why the Philippines. Now, for those who can get past the bizarre nature of this testimony, for those of you who can take this true story on its face, there are important things to consider that might just help us better understand both the reality of spiritual things, including spirits themselves, and the relationship of spiritual things with physical things. For instance, consider what is commonly known about how our vision works. Electromagnetic wavelengths are bouncing off of things in our environment. They go into the eye, and the wavelengths that fall within the parameters, the spectrum of white light, are interpreted by our brain, which creates an image based on that information. So, how then did I see the demon in complete darkness? And I call it a demon because it was a spirit and it was accompanied by the presence of evil and terror. What are the mechanics that allowed me to see that demon spirit in a room so dark I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face bouncing it off my nose? Was it its own source of illumination? Or was there some other phenomenon that allowed my brain to also process wavelengths outside of the normal spectrum of white light? And assuming the spirit is also around at other times, why isn't it seen at other times in the dark? Also, what made that presence manifest in the room? Not emotion, but the ability to discern it actually as its presence. It was like a palpable presence. Was a portal opened, allowing the discernment of another existing reality? Or was it the temporary overlaying of two realities? And here's one for you. Was that spirit always around in the environment? Or did it become present as it was exiting my girlfriend? However it happened, the fact is that spirit entities do exist. And given the right conditions, whatever those conditions are, they can be seen by the human eye. And if that was even a glimpse of what actually exists in another dimension or realm, I can tell you this: you don't want anything to do with that. If that was something to do with the realm of hell, then brothers and sisters, you do not want any part of that. And you should do anything that you can to avoid ever going there. From the biblical perspective, the way to avoid that is by obeying God, who commands us to love one another. Love, my friends, walking in the Spirit of God according to His Word in unrelenting, pure love, God's love, is the fulfillment of what He requires of us to be with Him eternally and avoid that place of horror. And when you think of it, even if nothing was at stake, why would you ever want to do anything other than love anyway? It's love that produces peace and joy. It's love that heals and blesses. May God bless you as you seek and serve Him first in love. Love only, in Jesus' name. Yes and amen.